Today I'm going to speak on a topic that was quite dear to Krishnamurti, in the sense that he used the phrase, the art of living, right from 1930s till the 1980s. But what he meant by that was quite different from what some of the modern gurus mean by the same phrase which they use, because they describe various techniques of meditation or breathing and so on as the art of living. And Krishnaji had a totally different meaning for that, which is what I'm going to talk about. The purpose of all art is to convey a sense of beauty, whether it is painting or architecture or sculpture or poetry, literature, and so on. We have been educated into different arts. But Krishnaji said, greater than all these arts is the art of living. Now, this sense of beauty is somewhat mysterious. It's not clear why nature has endowed the human consciousness with this sense of beauty. When all elements are in the right proportion, it creates joy in the human consciousness. And that's what we mean by beauty. So you look at sunrise, you look at a blooming tree, you look at the sky, and there is a sense of joy that you experience if you have the sensitivity to feel that. It doesn't seem to be necessary for survival. So I don't know why this sense arose. The scientists have tried to analyze it and have discovered what is called the golden ratio. It's something like 1.618 or so. And it occurs in nature very frequently. Also in the cosmos, in the galaxies, you find this proportion. And when there is that proportion, our mind and our eyes have been so constructed as to experience a sense of beauty. Now, Krishnaji said that if we can put everything in our life in the right place, then it evokes a sense of beauty. Nature has endowed the human consciousness with the capacity for imagination, for thinking, for memory, perhaps to a much greater extent than most other creatures. And if we can put all that in its right place, it creates a sense of beauty, a sense of joy, which has no cause. It's part of nature. Order. Keats wrote that truth is beauty and beauty truth. That's all there is to know, and all that you need to know. So there have been others who have felt this about the sense of beauty, which is the joy that one innately experiences in witnessing or in engaging with a certain activity. There is great sense of beauty in almost every aspect of life, if you are sensitive to it. There is beauty in art, in music, in literature. There is beauty in science and mathematics. There is beauty in sports and games, in architecture. And if you are sensitive, just by engaging in these activities, you experience a joy, and that joy is what one calls as beauty. There's great beauty also in friendship, in cooperation, in working together. But one has to be sensitive to it, and sensitivity comes through contact. It's a mysterious thing. You can't learn sensitivity from a book or from a teacher in the classroom. It comes from contact. You must have all experienced that if you listen to classical music long enough, then you develop that sensitivity to perceive the beauty and the joy in that music. Similarly, if you pay attention to nature and watch it silently, it cultivates a sense of beauty, a sense of joy, which you experience in relating with nature. But if you are in a hurry, if you don't pay attention, you miss that joy and the beauty of it. Unfortunately, our education lays great stress on achievement and promotes ambition. And that destroys sensitivity because it makes you pay attention only in one particular direction, the direction in which you can get that achievement or fulfill that ambition. Whereas when you pay attention to everything, then you discover the beauty in all of life. And that is the art of living. Once you experience this sense of beauty, you live with great joy, and there is no need to pursue pleasure. Human beings pursue pleasure because they want to escape from boredom. And boredom is essentially insensitivity. What does boredom mean? After all, there is the sky out there, there is the tree, there is the dog round the corner, there are your friends, there are books, there are newspapers. And if you're bored, you have to ask yourself, what does it mean? Does it mean none of this interests me? And why? Why does it not interest you? Why does it not thrill you? As a child is thrilled by everything, by rainfall, by the mud, by a broken doll. Everything thrills a child. And we have all been that child. The child is there inside you. But subsequently, as we grow up, we destroy that joy by choosing, by saying, this is important, that is not important. Pay attention to this, don't pay attention to that. Don't waste your time playing games. Do your studies, and so on. So Krishnaji wanted to change education so that human beings grow up with sensitivity and are taught the value of paying attention to everything. Because it's when you pay attention that you establish contact. And that contact develops this sensitivity called beauty. The ambitious man has no time to pay attention to his children. So he loses the relationship with his children. There's great beauty in relating with your child, with your wife, with your home, with your garden, with the flower. There's great beauty, but you need to have a sense of leisure. And that sense of leisure is denied when you are ambitious, wanting to achieve some kind of success, what you call success. So Krishna is saying, can you mute everybody, Mr. Rao? Yeah. So Krishnaji wanted to change education so that children are brought up to be sensitive human beings, not only to music and art and so on, but just to friendship, to a plant, to an animal. You have to create activities which would cultivate that sense of beauty in the child, make him grow a plant and care for it, look after a pet and relate with that pet. But because we have given tremendous importance to achievement, and we think success is through achievement, therefore, we don't allow children to pay attention to everything else in life. And that's what makes for insensitivity, boredom. And in order to escape from boredom, you need more and more pleasures. And to buy pleasures, you need more and more money. And all that has become our idea of success, that if you have a lot of money, you can buy a lot of pleasure and run away from yourself, from your loneliness, from boredom. But all that is not necessary if you are sensitive. Then everything is a source of joy. And that is essential to the art of living. So there is great joy in just playing games, provided you don't give importance to winning. If you give tremendous importance to winning, then you are again looking for an achievement, for some, using that game for victory, for fame, for recognition, and it becomes an ego activity. But if you play just for the joy of playing, as we do when it is a hobby, then none of those negative emotions enter, because then you are not playing that game egoistically. So this freedom from the ego is an essential part of sensitivity and the sense of beauty and the joy in life. When you lost the joy in life, you need to cultivate more and more pleasure. Not that pleasure is anything wrong. Pleasure is also an innate part of our life. You meet a friend, it gives you pleasure. You go for a walk, it gives you pleasure. You look at nature and it gives you pleasure. You eat some food and it gives you pleasure. So pleasure is a natural part of it. But the desire to maximize pleasure, to have more of it, to repeat it, to possess it so that you can have it every day, all that destroys sensitivity, all that becomes like ambition, all that becomes an egotistic approach to life. It also destroys friendship. If you approach a friend always because you want something from him, then you're not a true friend. A true friend is one who just comes for the sake of sharing life. And in that sharing, there is great beauty. So all this is part of the art of living. And one has to, you can't learn this from a book or from a teacher. You have to learn this by yourself, by engaging in that activity and paying full attention to that activity without bringing in a sense of competition, rivalry, or achievement. You can demand excellence of yourself. That's a different matter. It's not comparative compared to another. But you have also to think about the excellence at the level of consciousness. There is excellence at the level of consciousness only when that consciousness is not trapped in the ego process, in tradition, in identification, in seeking security all the time, psychological security. So that's why freedom from all this conditioning, the notion of success and so on, the beliefs of your particular culture is essential. Otherwise, you cultivate only a narrow aspect of life and miss out on the rest of life. Now, in every activity, there is both a technique to be learned and there is also a spirit in which you need to engage in that activity. The technique you can learn from a teacher. The method, the structure, the technique can be learned, but that won't create the spirit behind it. And it's the spirit that gives this sense of beauty. Let me illustrate that with a few examples. There is the spirit of religion, which is love, compassion, non-violence, affection for no reason, the absence of the self-motive. And there is the method and technique, which is the ritual, the belief in God, the prayer, the singing, and so on, which are the methods of religion. If you don't have the spirit, these have very little significance. They are shallow. So the spirit of religion is more important than the methods of religion. The methods of religion vary from culture to culture, but the technique and the method does not create the spirit. In art, the spirit is this sensitivity, this sense of beauty. Then you can express that beauty through sculpture or through architecture or through poetry. And it helps to learn the techniques for doing that. But that's manifestation of that spirit. If you don't have the sense of beauty, what are you trying to express through your art? It becomes something mechanical. In games and sports, there is the sportsman spirit. We talk to the children about it, that you play the game for the joy of playing, and you excel in that joy. But if you give tremendous importance to winning the game, then it becomes like a war. You see your friend on the other side as an enemy, as a competitor, as a rival. And you are happy if he falls, because then you will win. So all kinds of negative emotions, the desire to play foul, enter into the game. All that comes from the egoistic approach, which gives importance to the result and not to the process. Can we stay with the process and pay attention to the process to experience this joy and to become sensitive to the beauty of that particular activity in which we are engaging? That's part of the art of living. And one has to learn this for oneself. It is an essential part of self-knowledge. Nobody else can teach you this. It's like a balance. Anything that involves a balance, you cannot learn from the book or from another teacher. Even bicycling, you cannot learn from the book. Swimming, you cannot learn from the book. You would have to get into the water and learn for yourself the balance that gives you the ability to swim. And there is the joy that you experience in doing that. Like that, when everything is in its right proportion, which nobody can define, it's not like an engineering drawing where you can define the lines and contours. It's something that you have to discover for yourself. How much pleasure should one have in life? If you cut out all pleasure, you cut out life. If you cultivate pleasure, you end up in addictions, which are the other extreme of the problem. So what is my right relationship with pleasure? Who is going to tell you that? Who's going to define that? No guru, no teacher can tell you the line. You will have to find out that line between what is the right relationship with pleasure and when does it enter into the danger zone. So in everything in life, there is this right proportion and right balance. Knowledge and thought have their right place. And you have to find out what is that right place, because where you need to think things out, if you don't use thought, it goes wrong. And if you use thought in realms where thought has no role, also it goes wrong. So what is the right place of thought and analysis and reason in our life, and where is the boundary between that and the emotions and the heart. So Krishnaji, in one of his talks in Bombay in 1984, said, put your intellect in your heart. It has no value outside it. But we have defined intelligence as the ability of the intellect, as the clever use of thought to achieve ends. And Krishnaji is saying that's not intelligence. There is no intelligence without compassion. So it's a holistic quality, and you have to come upon that holistic quality, and nobody can teach you that. So the spirit is something one has to learn by oneself in engaging in that activity and paying attention, so that that sense of beauty develops, which is sensitive. Even in government, there is the art of government. There is the structure of democracy, which is the separation of the executive from the judiciary, the freedom of the press, the elections every 4 or 5 years, and so on. All that is the structure of democracy. But the spirit of democracy, if it is not there, then it is not a true democracy. And the spirit of democracy is one of humility. It says none of us really knows what is the best way to organize our society. So let us sit down. Let us look at our problems and let us discuss them, so that we educate each other and become aware of all the issues that are facing us. Having so educated each other by listening to each other, we can then ask for proposals, what should be done? And if there is more than one proposal, we vote and we accept the majority view. But when the majority view is accepted, it's accepted by all, and therefore everybody contributes to making a success of that, what method you have or what structure you have adopted. But if you are self-centered, if you say, no, what I suggested was not accepted, therefore I will not cooperate with this, then that's not the democratic spirit. So the democratic spirit is essentially a spirit of cooperation and of humility. You find that in today's democracies, whether it's in the US or in Europe or in India, that spirit is missing. The opposition are not enemies. They are friends with a difference of view. And you have decided that we will vote and accept the majority view, and then we will all help to make it, realize it. Because we have a common interest. Our interest is in peace, prosperity, and happiness of our society. So the opposition are friends with a difference of opinion. They are not rivals and competitors. Then when there are problems, we sit down again and again confer and again repeat this whole process. That is the spirit of democracy. But because that spirit is missing, we cheat. We use money to buy votes. We tell lies and do propaganda. That means you don't really believe in the system that you have adopted. And if you see, we human beings do that repeatedly in every field. You institute examinations because you want to evaluate how far you have learned and what further you need to learn. And then you cheat in that because you want to be the first. And by cheating, you get more marks. Or you copy from your neighbor. So you don't really believe in that system. We accept the system of family and then we cheat. We look for pleasures on the side. We don't keep our promise or our word. All that comes from the ego. That means giving great importance to the pleasures of the first person singular and not realizing that we are all connected with each other. And unless all of us are happy, none of us can be completely happy. To seek your happiness independent of everybody else is the illusion. And that's the illusion of the ego. So you will find that in this spirit, it is always the non-egoistic spirit that has value. The egoistic creates ambition, brings all kinds of negative emotions and rivalries and division. So that's the greatest block to learning and to beauty, to joy in life. And yet, we think that the ego is a friend, that it helps me, it protects me, and it makes me succeed. That's the greatest single illusion of humanity, that it thinks that acting out of self-interest is in its self-interest. It is not. Because we are all connected to each other. And if you consider your self-interest as apart from that of all others, you will create division and you will create war, which is what's going on in our society. So ultimately, the art of living requires this freedom from the ego process, which means you have to realize the danger of approaching life with self-interest and always seeking something in every relationship for yourself. The ego is a great beggar, always asking something for itself in every relationship. When a friend comes to you only because he needs something from you, we don't call him a true friend. When he comes just to share life with no motive, no purpose, then that is love, that is friendship. So it is this illusion, but the illusion is very pernicious. It runs deep in our consciousness. And it will go only when you really perceive the danger of the ego. And that's why Krishnamurti said, you have to watch. Don't just form opinions and condemn anger, jealousy, and so on as ego, manifestations of the ego. Your opinion of condemning it does nothing. But if you take it as an information to you that there is something in your consciousness which is illusory, which is causing this disorder in consciousness. And you need to learn that and free yourself of that. Then you can treat these as an opportunity to learn for yourself. Such a learning mind is the true religious mind. And that is what self-knowledge is, to free oneself of illusion and live with the real. And that's part of the art of living. There was a time when Fritjof Capra, the man who wrote The Tao of Physics, which was the first book that drew parallels between quantum mechanics and religion, Eastern religions particularly. He was interested in Krishnamurti and he went to Sanen and attended Krishnamurti's talks. Then he went and asked Krishnamurti. He said, "Sir, in order to do what you are saying, do I have to give up my science?" And Krishnaji said, "No, sir. But you are a human being first, and then a scientist. So learn the art of living, then do your science. Then it doesn't matter. You will be able to do it, and you will not do it egoistically, and therefore it will not be destructive. But if you don't learn the art of living, you will use your powers destructively to dominate, to create violence, to divide and fight, which is what is happening in the world today. So to set that right, Krishnaji wanted to change education, both for children in schools, by bringing them up without fear, without punishment, without competition and rivalry. And he said, school is a place of leisure. Leisure doesn't mean you do nothing. Leisure means the mind is free to pay attention to whatever it is doing. That is the sense of leisure. It's the absence of ambition. Because ambition drives you in a particular direction. So to live with this learning mind rather than a reactive mind is an essential part of the art of living. The same activity can be done ambitiously, egoistically. The same activity can be done with love, without ambition, with enthusiasm. And if you watch Krishnamurti, you will find that he talks to the schoolboy with the same enthusiasm and passion as he does in his discussions with David Bohm. There was not this feeling that this man is a top scientist and important person, and that child, who cares, what does he know? There was no such evaluation. In both places, there was a relationship, and in that relationship, there was no motive except sharing with great love and enthusiasm. That is the art of living. Can you do something for its own sake, for the love of it, and not all the time seeking rewards, seeking achievement, seeking fame and name through that activity. So it's at the motive level that the ego comes in. It's not that some activities are egoistic and other activities are non-egoistic. And that's why you cannot practice virtue by defining certain activities as virtuous. All religions have tried to do that and they have failed. Because our decisions work only in very superficial matters. You can't decide to be peaceful. You can't decide to love. You can't decide to be happy. You can't decide to perceive beauty. The greatest things in life don't come from decision. They are a byproduct of learning, this learning which is self-knowledge. Thank you. I'll end it here and we can have some discussion or questions if you have.
Thank you, Professor Krishna. So everyone, feel free to enter questions in the chat in Zoom. We will start with a couple of questions that we already have.
Sure.
The first question is from Kusraf Razban. Thank you, sir. Is intelligence the outcome of a sensitive mind? Kay says that compassion has its own intelligence. Can we say that when you're sensitive, there is compassion?
You know, love, compassion, empathy are all part of sensitivity. And in friendship, if there is empathy, if there is feeling for the other person for no reason, that is love. And that is sensitive. We just talked about it, the beauty of having a relationship without a motive. That's true friendship. I think the most beautiful expression of that I found was in Khalil Gibran's description of friendship in the Prophet. He says there, let there be no purpose in friendship, save the deepening of the spirit. For love that seeks aught but the disclosure of its own mystery is not love, but a net that is cast forth, and only the unprofitable is caught. The Prophet is saying you may think that it is profitable, what you receive from the egoistic approach, but it is not profitable. He's saying it is unprofitable because you will never know what really love is. And that's a great tragedy in life. And that's what is insensitive. But unfortunately, we are cultivating that because we have given tremendous importance to achievement, because we look upon education entirely as a means for economic development, not for human development. All this is necessary for human development, for the human being. But when you are only concerned with economic development of the nation, you are using your children as raw material to get work done in society. And that's a very careless way of relating with our children. So Krishnaji used to often ask, he used to say, sir, I doubt whether you really love your children. Because if you loved your children really, you wouldn't create such an education. You would create a different kind of education. But we have created education in the factory model. The child is a raw material to be put in at the age of 6. And after 14 years, at the age of 20, out comes an engineer, an artist, a poet, a computer scientist, and he performs the work you want done in society. You don't care whether he is creative or not, whether he is a happy marriage or not, whether he is joyous or he is living in depression, you're not interested. You're only interested in the achievement part. And that's a very careless way of looking at one's own children. But that's the kind of education we have set up. So we are creating insensitive human beings. And therefore, all the time, all this emphasis on advertisement, enticement, consumerism, pursuit of pleasure, and entertainment. Everything has become entertainment. Sports has also become entertainment.
Are we ready for the next question?
Yes, please.
Yes. So we have a question from Ruth Fisher Walter. How can one see beauty in the misery? For example, in the war in Ukraine.
No, when you are sensitive both to the joy and the pain. You are sensitive to sorrow, but it's not the personal sorrow. It is the sorrow of compassion. You have to distinguish between personal sorrow, which is out of self-pity. I didn't get this, I didn't get that. Why was I treated so badly and by life, and so on, so on. And the sorrow of compassion, which is you feel the pain of the other. You don't want to throw away the sorrow of compassion. You need to throw away your personal sorrow. Throw away meaning learn how it gets created by your own approach in life. And that approach is determined by wrong kind of thinking.
So the next question is longer. I will read the entire several questions, and I can later on repeat any parts that are needed.
I would prefer to answer one question at a time. If you tell me several questions, I find it difficult to hold them all in memory and answer them.
Yes, the reason I was thinking of reading the entire thing initially is just to give context of the entire, and then I can go back to just say one of them at a time.
Sure.
It's from T. Havdarova. The notion of beauty involves comparison, namely the comparison to an ideal. And isn't this something J.K. advised against? Is an
No, sir,
aesthetic...
there is no comparison in beauty. When you see the early morning sun rising on the sea or in a river, do you need to compare that with something else in order to sense the beauty? You sense the beauty immediately. When you see a flower growing in your garden, do you need to compare that with your neighbor's garden in order to sense beauty? Comparison is a disease which we are trained into by our education. There is absolutely no need to compare. There is need to pay attention, to be aware, to be wholly with the present, and not all the time absent-minded thinking of the past or the future. Then you pay attention to the present, and as we pointed out, that creates a sensitivity which gives you the sense of beauty. It has no comparison in it.
And then another part, Is an aesthetic stage necessary as something more than just a stage? For example, writing poetry as a means of transcendence. Doesn't awareness render sensuality and the notion of beauty obsolete?
No, I think that when there is awareness and you are living in the present, it cultivates sensitivity and you perceive the beauty that is inherently there in that activity. Beauty is the joy of engaging in that activity. And you need a certain sensitivity in your mind to perceive that joy. And that sensitivity doesn't come when you are trying to achieve some result out of it, because then you are not paying attention to the whole. You are only paying attention in the direction of your ambition.
And the last part, doesn't enjoyment involve superfluous emotions and the risk of psychologizing? I'm asking these questions since I can't say I fully comprehend the idea of beauty while I'm acutely sensitive to truth.
So you have to stay with the question, is pleasure the same thing as happiness? Because joy is connected with happiness and pleasure is connected with sensation. But they feel similar. When you have pleasure, you feel happy, and therefore you mistake it for happiness. Happiness has no cause. Unhappiness has a cause. And if you eliminate unhappiness, there is only happiness. Haven't you noticed sometimes when you are in good health and you go off in the morning for a walk, you feel joyous for no reason. There is no reason why you feel joyous. You are joyous just to be alive. But we don't value that because we measure value in terms of achievement. When you are laid up in a hospital for a month, you pray to God and say, God, just give me the strength to walk on that road. I don't want anything more from you. Let me get out of this room in this hospital. But when you have the capacity to walk on that road, it means nothing to you. It becomes routine. You no longer enjoy it. So actually, we all have an infinity. When you are healthy, you already have an infinity, but you are seeking infinity plus delta x, and that delta x creates the problem. The craving is this desire for more. If you can free yourself of that desire for more and pay attention to what you have, you already have an infinity.
Now we have a question from Ravi and Mahadev. Paying attention, can we cultivate it? As far as I do understand, we cannot.
No, it's a natural thing when it happens because you are interested in learning, then you pay attention. When you are interested in perceiving the beauty in music, you listen to that music and you pay attention in order to learn and in order to come upon that sensitivity. It has no ambition in it. It's when you want to be the Greatest musician in town, that you turn that into competition and rivalry and achievement. There is no need for that. If you don't compare yourself with another, you are what you are, and that's good enough. You have to deal with what you are and learn about what you are and improve your sensitivity by paying attention to that. Instead of that, one is comparing with another and feeling small or elated, depends on whom you compare with. All that is a psychological game that our mind plays. So that's why Krishnamurti says, free your mind of comparison. Don't compare. Don't all the time evaluate and judge. But our education has brought us up and trained us into doing that. Also, when you hear a statement, we have been trained to agree or disagree with that statement. Both these are equally unintelligent responses to the statement. Because when you agree, it just means that that's what you already were thinking. So nothing changes. When you disagree and therefore reject that statement, again, nothing changes. It's only when you listen to that statement, consider what does it mean, and then stay with that question in order to inquire and find out whether that is true, that there is the possibility of learning something new. But we are trained into agreeing and disagreeing, which means we live with conclusions, not with questions. And the art of living is to live with profound questions and look upon life as a mystery, not as a problem to be solved. This was first pointed out, I think, by Nietzsche. He wrote, life is not a problem to be solved. It's a mystery to be lived. So our approach determines everything. Krishna used to say that. He said, sir, the approach is to a question is more important than either the question or the answer. Because the approach will determine what you will receive out of your investigation. If your approach is ambitious, you will only get the result of that ambition. If your approach is for understanding what life, then you will get sensitivity, the joy of that activity, everything. So your approach, which means the mindset in which you engage in that activity, matters more, which is what we said, that the spirit is more important than the technique. But we are given tremendous importance to the technique. Once you have the spirit, the technique, you will learn the technique, but the technique will never create the spirit.
So now I will read a question from Kanchan Gogate. Life is a movement in a relationship, Krishnaji said. But when we relate, we identify. He also asked, can we ask without identifying? Then in what sense life becomes a movement in a relationship?
Krishnaji meant by relationship something quite different from what we normally mean in society, which is family relationship or blood relationship. He talked about relationship as relationship to nature, relationship to pleasure, relationship to friends, people, ideas, ideologies, the whole thing. So from the day we are born till we die, we are in relationship with everything in our environment. It is in that sense that you use the word relationship, which means life is relationship. And to learn the art of relationship is the art of living. What is right relationship with nature? What is right relationship with pleasure? What is right relationship with your work, with your family? That is something one has to learn. It's not automatic. It won't come without asking that question and engaging with that question. So he says, live with questions and observe, and you will learn. All that is required for learning is a question and observation, which capacity every human being has. But we have not been trained to do that. We have been trained to go in a particular direction which we think is success. And success has been defined as greater GNP, greater money, greater position, status, and so on, all of which is ego and ambition. And that has created the kind of society that we are living in. So we are the authors of our own sorrow, but we don't think so. We don't know that. I'm not sure I got your question correctly, Kanchan. So you can point out if there is you meant something else.
No, you answered it to a last extent. I just wanted to say, when we relate, do we really identify?
No, when you relate, you don't need identify, but you identify because you seek security in that relationship. Then you identify. You identify with a community, with a caste, with a nation, with a language. You identify. You identify means you begin to possess. You start feeling proud about it. And you derive status out of that, identity out of that. So Krishna says, can you just relate without this desire to receive something out of it? Don't invest in it psychologically, in other words.
So next we have a question from Karthik Gupta. What do you mean by right proportion in beauty? Is beauty subjective, objective, or a combination of both?
It lies in the eye of the beholder. And when we say the eye, it includes the entire consciousness and the mind of the viewer. Because if it is not sensitive, you will not perceive the beauty. The ambitious man doesn't look at the river. He says, I've seen this river before. It keeps flowing there, and I don't get anything out of it, so why should I look at it? He's walking on the road, but his mind is in his office, because that's what he's interested in, because that leads to his promotion and so on, and that's what is his ambition. So the ambitious mind is not a learning mind, and it will not pay attention. And we are promoted ambition because we are interested in achievement. We value human beings who have made achievement. A human being who jumps half a millimeter more than all other human beings is made into a hero, an Olympic champion, and so on. They're asking the wrong question. The right question is, do they enjoy their jumping? That's more important than whether somebody jumped half a millimeter more than everybody else. I'm afraid the whole approach is wrong. I mean, that's why Krishna said, it's a wholly different way of living. A wholly different way. Your idea of success, your idea of happiness, your values completely different from what they are now. And the values with which we are living now have created this society in which we are living. And the state of the society is telling us that we are really not intelligent. We are extremely stupid the way we are living. But we don't think so. We think we are superior, we are very intelligent, because we have defined intelligence itself unintelligently. We have defined it as just cleverness at achieving results. That's not intelligence. That is just cleverness.
We have a question from Deepika Chatterjee. When taking a decision on a topic, initially the majority might make a choice, but with giving the minority a chance to express themselves, the whole group might change their mind, and the choice of the minority might become the majority decision. So is it not important to give both groups a chance to express their ideas before making a decision?
Yes, of course. And that I said that democracy, the spirit of democracy is one of humility, which says none of us really knows what is the best way to organize our society. So let's sit down, let us confer with each other, listen to each other with respect. All views about different people, what issues they are facing, what they think is important in society. And in listening to each other in that way, we learn about all the issues that are involved. Having done that, then you invite proposals and so on. It has no meaning to invite proposals when you are not intelligent about the issues. You have to first become knowledgeable and intelligent about the issues, and we can help each other to do that, provided we don't look upon each other as competitors and enemies and so on, in which case we are not interested in listening to each other. We are interested in scoring a point over the other. So the spirit of democracy is completely different from the form of democracy. We have mistaken the form of democracy to be democracy. And the spirit of democracy is far more important than the form.
Next is a question from Siamal Rao. Do not knowledge of methods and techniques lead me to understand the spirit behind the concept? If not, what enables me to understand the spirit?
If you engage in that activity with a learning mind, you will discover the right spirit for engaging in. Because when you engage in it with the wrong spirit, it will produce conflict, it will produce boredom, and so on. So if you have to watch your consciousness, if there is conflict in arising, then you have not come upon the truth. You have not really discovered the right way of approaching things. And so you have to learn. You may experiment, you may fail, doesn't matter. From the failure, you learn and move on. Not become ashamed that I haven't succeeded and so on, all that. Somewhere I read that repentance is man's second mistake. First he makes a mistake, now he repents that mistake, which is second mistake. Because repentance is nothing, not learning. You have to learn and move on. Everything. How did you learn even walking? A child has to fall a few times before he learns how to walk. How did you learn bicycling? You get up on the cycle, you will fall. But you will learn eventually. So there is nothing wrong in falling, provided you use that for learning. We have taught people to feel shame in failure. There is no shame in failure. There is shame in not learning from failure. Well, if I may illustrate what this learning mind is, because I think we have been so trained to think of learning as the accumulative learning of knowledge and skills that we are not familiar with this learning. Take an incident, a man walking on a road, trips on a stone and falls. What does the normal man do? Assess the town government for not clearing the road. And he feels great irritation, anger, and self-pity that now I'll not be able to go to my office, I have injury, and he goes to the doctor, get treated, and so on, and he's bitter that he has to take leave that day. He learns nothing, he only reacts. Now, if he has a learning mind, he asks himself, why did I not notice this stone while I was walking on the road? And if he is really interested and honest, he says, because I was not watching the road. Why was I not watching the road when I was walking on the road? Oh, because I have been on that road so many times. I have seen everything there. I know. So where was your mind while you were walking on the road? I was thinking of something in my office. Why were you thinking of something in your office when you were walking on the road? Oh, because that's so important. It connects with what my boss will think about me, what my promotion will be, and so on. So it's far more important than this walking on the road and watching the birds and the trees. And I can always do that another time. So he has learned a lot. He has learned that if you are ambitious and you want that promotion in your office, your mind is all the time there and you are absent. This is something very peculiar to the human consciousness, that we can be physically present in a situation and mentally absent. So many students will attend a lecture and they are mentally absent. They are not in the classroom. They are not able to pay attention to what the teacher is saying. Then they don't learn. They learn afterwards by sitting and under pressure of the exam and so on, they learn from the book. Because we have not been trained to give importance to learning. We are seeking pleasure, we are seeking ambition, and so on. So the whole approach to life becomes wrong. The whole thing goes wrong. So the learning mind is very different from the ambitious mind. The achieving mind or the reactive mind. All the time reacting, my opinion is this, I felt hurt, I like that, I don't like this. So all the emphasis is only on I. That's the ego. That's what the ego does. And then the mind is no longer interested in the truth. It is interested in promoting the me and the mind, the success of the me and the mind, the comfort of the me and the mind, and the expansion of the me and the mind, and victory for the me and the mind. That's the egoistic mind. And freedom from the ego means you are not concerned mainly with only yourself. So if you're working in an office, you're working in a school, you are concerned with the whole school, all the people in the school. And you want to do what is right for all, not just what is good for you. What is just good for you is ego, which is corruption.
Now I will read the question from Gayatri Chandavarkar. Pablo Picasso said that the purpose of art is to cleanse the dust of daily living. Would you like to comment on this quote and throw light on how living artistically, as Kay puts it, will cleanse us and make us loving, caring, and sensitive beings?
Well, I think my whole talk was about this, that if you engage in an activity and pay attention with a learning mind, you develop sensitivity. Sensitivity comes from contact, and contact is there only when you pay attention. And that's what brings the sense of beauty and the joy. So that joy is cleaning the dust, as in Picasso's language. I understand that to mean that the dust in life is removed by that. You live joyously. You perceive joy. Of course, you also perceive sorrow, because sensitivity doesn't mean you will only enjoy. You also become sensitive to dirt, to cruelty, to sorrow. Not only your sorrow, global sorrow, sorrow of others, which is compassion. So that's what is lacking. That's what is lacking. All that cruelty in Ukraine is possible because we have lost compassion. And the ideology and the idea of victory overtakes. You can be extremely cruel person and feel that you are doing good for your country. Putin talks about it, that he is liberating that country. So you can always adjust your ideology to justify anything. You're not interested in truth. You're doing propaganda for your own sake. That's the ego. The ego makes your mind like a personal lawyer who is all the time defending the me and the mind, promoting the interest of the me and the mind. It is not interested in the truth. And it doesn't care about others. That's the danger of the ego. And yet, we all feel that the ego is protective and the ego is necessary, and we promote the ego in through competition, through rivalry, and so on in education. We have not perceived the danger of the egoistic approach. And we are suffering the consequences of it, which is why I said that we are the authors of our own sorrow. Nobody else is creating the sorrow. We ourselves are creating our sorrow. After all, we elect Putin to be the president of the country. And there is not just one Putin, there are 20 Putins in the world.
So I will read a question from Prasad Molupuri. Sir, is ancestor worship consistent with dying to the past?
Sir, why does one worship ancestors? I mean, if you feel a sense of gratitude for being born to your ancestors, that's one thing. But to worship the ancestors is to try to take pride in that ancestry. What did you do to have that ancestry? It was an accident of birth that you were born in that particular country, in that particular family, and so on. You did nothing to make that happen. So you are taking credit for something which you did not do. It's dishonest. If that's the motive in respecting your ancestors, then it's the wrong motive. It's the egoistic motive. And there could also be a lot of nonsensical things your ancestors said. So you need to have discernment. You have to discern what was true and what was false in what your ancestors said or did. Not everything that they did was good or right.
Mostly, sir, we feel grateful.
So that's okay. It's like thanking life for giving you this opportunity to be on the earth at this time. Yeah. If you feel that way, it's all right. That's a good feeling. But when it is egoistic, when you are trying to derive pride and importance out of it, and you say everything that my ancestors did was superior and better, is nonsense, it's propaganda. In our traditions and so on, there was very wrong things also.
I would like to read a question by Pedro Ramos. Is beauty a quality with which we judge things, or a sensation by which we perceive, understand things and the world?
Neither. It is the joy that is innate in engaging in that activity, provided you have the sensitivity to feel that. And as I said, scientists don't understand why this thing developed in our consciousness, because it's not necessary for survival. You could survive without the sense of beauty. Your joy would be much less, but you don't need that joy for survival. So we can be grateful to nature, to life, for having put this sense within us. I'm not sure if animals have that sense of beauty or not, but certainly the human consciousness has this capacity.
I will read a question from Shankar. Relationship is just a concept of mind, like any other concept like religion, nationality, rich, poor, great, etc. Is relationship only in your mind?
No, it depends on what meaning you give to that word. Most people talk of relationship as family relationship, blood relationship. I'm related to so-and-so means that I belong to the same family. Krishnaji is not using the word relationship in that way. I have a relationship to everything to which there is a response from my consciousness. So I look at the sky and there is a response from my consciousness. Therefore, I have a relationship with the sky, with the tree, with the river, with my neighbor. I have relationship with books because when I read them, there is a response from within me. So in that sense, we have a relationship with everything, with ideas, with ideologies, with other human beings, with animals, with plants, everything. But the important thing is, can you relate like a true friend with everything? A true friend doesn't come to you because he is wanting something from you. When you approach because you want something from it, you are approaching like a beggar. And the ego is the greatest beggar. It is always seeking something for itself in that relationship. And that's why Krishnamurti said, love is where the self is not. That means where there is no self-interest, there it's an act of love. But otherwise, it's a business, it's a trade you are doing. I'll do this for you, provided you give me that. That's a trade. It's very subtle, sir. You have to stay with these questions for a long time. Otherwise, you don't realize, you don't see that. You can give alms to a beggar, it's considered very virtuous, but you may be giving it because your friend who is watching will think highly of you. Then you are doing it egoistically. You may be giving it so that that man may feel grateful to you in return. And if he doesn't, you get angry with him. Then also it is not out of love or compassion. But when you give, unmindful of what you receive in return from it, because you want to give, and you want to give because you see his distress and you want to relieve that distress, then it's an act of love. So merely to say that giving alms to the beggar is a virtuous act is nonsensical. Your motive corrupts the act. Otherwise, the act is not corrupt in itself. Your motive corrupts it when it is egoistic.
So we have reached the end of the allotted time. We still have 4 questions remaining. So it seems that we would not be able to go through all of them. So just wanted to ask Professor Krishna whether you would like to conclude now or take one more question.
No, I think we should conclude now because these are endless questions. You know, you can go on asking questions and expecting answers. The important thing is to live with the questions and then find the answers in your own life through your own observation. Only those answers are your own answers. All the other answers which you receive from others should be taken as questions. Don't accept what Krishna says or what Krishnamurti says. You take it as a question, is that true? And investigate it. And don't answer just intellectually whether it is true or not, because then you will answer from your conditioning. Answer from observation in life, observing your own consciousness and the way life is happening. So question coupled with a honest observation creates learning.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Everybody. Thank you. We will see
Thank
you
you both for
in
your
24
patience
hours.
in listening to me.
Thank you. Goodbye
You're-
to everybody.
Bye-bye.
We'll see you next
Thank you, sir. Thank you so much.
time. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Yes.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Yes.
For next time.
Thank you. Have a nice day.
Prasad Garu, you can end the session, sir.